Good afternoon, church. It's great to connect with you this Wednesday as we do our midweek Bible study in key passages of Scripture. We are in Solomon part 3, and today the title of the message, The Conclusion of the Whole Matter, the conclusion of the whole matter, and we'll see why there at the end as we look and finish looking at the life of Solomon. We're kind of getting to that peak of his power and grandeur. His fame is all around the world. And even the Queen of Sheba, Africa, hears of his fame and wants to see if it's true. She wants to give him a test and see if he meets her qualifications of the wisest man in all the world. So in 1 Kings chapter 10, and this is the same as 2 Chronicles chapter 9, but we're going to go to 1 Kings, we see the Queen of Sheba. It says, when the Queen of Sheba heard the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. She came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue with camels that bore spices, very much gold, precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she spoke with him with all that was in her heart, tested him. Solomon answered all her questions. And there was nothing so difficult for the king that he could not explain it to her. And so he passed the test. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers, his entryway by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. She couldn't argue. This was the wisest man on the earth. Then she said to the king, it was true of the report that I heard of in my own land about your words and your wisdom. So this fame had gone far and wide in that time. And just think of it nowadays, it's that the transportation and news, and it's not like we send an email or send like a blast or we had a blog about it that people read around the world. No, this is something that the word of mouth messages had to slowly make its way farther and farther away as his fame was told. It says, however, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, the half was not told to me, so I didn't even see all of it. Your wisdom and prosperity exceeds the fame of which I heard. So we think of Solomon that time was a very famous king in the known world. Happy are your men and happy are those your servants who stand continually before you and hear your wisdom. Blessed be the Lord your God who delighted in you, setting you on the throne of Israel. Blessed be because the Lord has loved Israel forever. Therefore he made you king to do justice and righteousness. Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, spices in great quantities and precious stones. And there never came again such abundance of spices as the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. Also the ships of Hiram, which brought gold from Ophir, brought great quantities of almug wood and precious stones from Ophir. And the king made steps of almug wood in the house of the Lord and for the king's house, and also harps and string instruments for the singers. There never came such almug wood, I guess is a very expensive and famous wood from Africa, nor like there has been seen in this day, in Ethiopia actually. Now the king of Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired, wherever she asked, beside what Solomon had given her, according to the royal generosity. She turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. And we see that there was a connection here between, it was Ethiopia, where Queen of Sheba was from, and Israel. The connection lasts until we see the Ethiopian eunuch kind of representing the court of the kings and queens of Ethiopia coming to Israel, and then reading Isaiah, and then Philip stopping on the way. Do you understand what you're reading? And then he is saved after and is baptized. And there is a connection there with between those two countries. Currently, nowadays, there was a group of Ethiopian Jews who were airlifted out of there by Israel to Israel to bring them back home, and so we see there's connection between these two communities. There's also I don't know, legend or stories that say that the Queen of Sheba went back with more than just gold. She went back with just that relationship with Solomon, I guess. And then also, the church, her, following of Jehovah, and also the church. And we see there's a church that grew in Ethiopia, and has that Christian tradition we see from the Ethiopian eunuch later on. So there's a great connection between these two places. But what I want you to see and look at, and is that Solomon has reached his zenith. If we look at the next verses, we see his great wealth. The weight of the gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666 talents of gold. Oh, 666, bad number. And beside that, from the traveling merchants, from the income of traders, all the kings of Arabia, and from the governors of his own country. And King Solomon made 200 large shears of hammered gold, 600 shields of gold 600 shekels of gold went into each shield, 300 shields of hammered gold, three minas of gold went into each one of those shields. And he put those in his house of the forest of Lebanon. So he had his house here, his house there, many palaces. Made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with poor gold. The ivory, think of the elephant's horns. That's not easy to get. So the throne had 6 steps, and the top of the throne was round at the back, and there were armrests on either side of the place of the seat. 2 lions stood beside the armrests. 12 lions stood there, each on each side of the step. So we had the 12 lions and the 2 big lions and the throne of ivory. Nothing like this had been made for any other kingdom. All his drinking vessels were gold, nothing like less than gold touched his lips. All the vessels of the house of forest of Lebanon were pure gold. None was silver, for that was accounted nothing in the days of Solomon. The king had merchant ships at sea with the fleet of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the merchant ships came bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and monkeys. So they were going down to Africa. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. Later on, there's a story written, fiction, of course, King Solomon's mines, about where he got all this wealth. Now, all the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. So not only that, people came to him. Each man brought his present and articles of silver and gold, garments, armor, spices, horses, mules, and at set rate every year. And he gathered chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horsemen, whom he stationed in chariot cities with the kings at Jerusalem. With the king at Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. We heard that already. He made cedar trees as abundance as sycamores, which are in the lowland. Cedar is a very expensive wood. Solomon imported horses from Egypt and Keva. The king's merchants also bought them in Keva at current prices. Now a chariot that was imported from Egypt cost 600 shekels of silver, and a horse 150. Thus, through their agents, they exported them to all the king of the Hittites and the kings of Syria. So they became like also the middlemen to export all this wealth, and probably made money from it to all the kings that were in the other. So they brought them in and then sold them. So we say, wow, very prosperous, but also very dangerous. You see, when the Lord had told them back in the days of Moses, be careful, be careful, be careful. When you have kings, you need to make sure your kings follow the law. Deuteronomy 17, verse 14 says this: when you come to the land which the Lord your God has given you, possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like the nations around me. You shall surely set a king over you whom the Lord your God chooses. So Solomon was chosen. Okay, good. One among your brethren, you shall set as king over you. Yes. You may not set a foreigner over you. No. Who is not of your brother. And here it goes. But he shall not multiply horses for himself. Oops. I guess he forgot to read that one. Nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. Where did he buy his horses? Egypt. Uh-oh. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. So a lot of his gold and his silver and his money came from that area. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself. Oops. Well, we'll see that one next. Lest his heart turn away. Oops. Exactly what happens. Nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Well, multiplied it so much that silver was nothing and gold was everything. And it shall be when he sits on the throne of his kingdom that he shall write for himself a copy of this book of this law in a book, and from the one that he shall from the one before the priests, the Levites. So did he? We don't know. Probably in his youth, copied the book of the law. He knew the law. He was the wisest man on the earth. He did speeches, and he investigations and scientific research and all sorts of things. So he probably did do this. So he probably knew this and read this. And that he might be careful to observe all the words of the law and his statutes. Well, that one, he knew him, but he didn't maybe observe him. That his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandments, nor to the right, to the left, that he may prolong his day in the kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. There it is. He knew it, and we looked at that last week, but did he obey it? He was the wisest man on the earth. He could answer all the questions of the Queen of Sheba, but did he obey them? Did he do them? Did he turn to the right or to the left? Well, he had the horses. Scripture, law said, don't multiply horses. He had the gold and the silver. Well, but you might say, well, the Lord gave him that. Yes, but it seems like it got to be just the end and not, the end and not the means. Lord, it's the Lord gave him that, but he kept multiplying it. And it seemed to be the focus of his, to have more and more and more and more and more. And when is it enough? Well, we'll see what happens here at the end. 1 Kings 11. But King Solomon loved many foreign women. There it is. You weren't supposed to do that, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh. That was the first wife. Women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations whom the Lord has said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. What have we just read in Deuteronomy? Now Solomon clung to these in love. You may say, well, maybe they were for treaties. He was making treaties with all the nations. Well, he had 700 wives, princesses. Okay, so treaties. He made lots of treaties, I guess. And he had what? 300 concubines. Well, those really weren't for treaties. But, passionate man, 700 plus 300, that's 1,000. 1,000 women that he had to deal with. And I mean, think of it. A day has 365, a year has 365 days. That is a little bit excessive. And you think about it, it says here, he clung to them with love. It's almost at that time, if you had a pretty daughter, you better hide her from Solomon, because he might want to add to his harem, to his concubines. He just had more than any man could know what to do with. And you can say that it was for treaties, but then we'll see there was so much more. And so this was something in his life that he was, one of his focus, get more and more and more and more. And it kind of brings back to the story what happened to his father. He had these wives, and then he saw one more. Oh, there's Bathsheba. Oh, wait, that's his mom. What happened there? Well, it's kind of like history is repeating this, that David couldn't say no and ended up killing Uriah to get Bathsheba. And we had Nathan coming to him, giving the story about a man who had all this flock of sheep and wasn't satisfied with his flock of sheep, but took the sheep of another man to be to eat and to sacrifice. It's the same thing. We see there always had to be more and more and more. And so we see, even though he was wise, it seemed that at this time there was an excess. And then what happens? Verse 4, for it was so, when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father. When he was old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord God. And you may say, well, he was strong. He knew God. He prayed. Well, what happens? You have 700, 300, 1,000 of these foreign women with foreign gods. And they're wanting, hey, we want a place to worship our God. And wait, Solomon, you should come and worship with us. And he loved them. It says he loved them. And it's over and over. It's Solomon, come and worship with us. Solomon, come and worship with us. Solomon, come and worship with us. I mean, he wrote it himself. Proverbs 19:13. And the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. So Solomon had a drip problem, but he had a serious drip problem. These wives were drip, 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 drip. And he had 1,000 drips. Solomon come, Solomon come, Solomon worship, Solomon worship, Solomon worship, Solomon worship. When he's finally old and tired, he said, okay. And he gave in. And we see the wives turned his heart, drip, 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 away from God. And isn't that like many things in our life that we let take control, that we let take priority, that we want more and more and more. And we say, no, I'm going to be faithful to God. I'm going to follow him. But it's that drip, 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 drip that begins to turn our heart away from him. And we need to be careful. That's why the Lord gave us his law, gave us his word. Be careful. It's like the song, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. There's a Father up above who is looking on in love. Oh, be careful, little eyes, ears, mouth, feet, where you go, all that. But we need to remember, be careful, because those drip, 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 drip of things that we accumulate and the things we give priority to and things that we see here, Solomon clung to these in love. Very key. He clung to them. He didn't want to let go. They were important. And he clung to them in love, and drip, 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 drip. They turned his heart away from God. So much that in verse 5, we see he went after Ashtoreth, the god of Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, did not fully follow the Lord as did his father David. Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is east of Jerusalem, and Moloch, the abomination of the people of Ammon. And he did likewise for all his foreign wives who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. So all of them, all of a sudden, he set the pattern for the kings after him for idolatry, of having all these foreign religions. And, Moloch was the one that, they had the hands that were made of metal, and they'd heat it up and put a baby in there, and they'd sacrifice the baby to their gods. These were abominations. These were ones that were totally against everything the Lord had taught them in the law that he was supposed to write down and actually copy and read and know and not go to the right or the left. But you see that constant drip, drip, drip. When he clung to something in love, it led him astray, and it led him very, very far. I think we can learn something from this. We can learn that it's not in a moment that we leave the Lord. It's not in just a one, we lost our mind for a second, or we just, but it's step by step, moment by moment, as we put our eyes on other things and as we cling to other things, and that drip, drip, drip leads us away till our heart is turned to all these other things and away from the Lord. So the Lord, as we see, he became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned from the Lord God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. And he commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord commanded. He had told him, this is not something he did. I didn't know. No, he knew it. He knew it, and he knew it well, but he made that choice. He made that choice. We did not keep what the Lord had commanded. Therefore, the Lord said to Solomon, because you have done this. So if Solomon knew, the Lord, remember, he spoke to Solomon twice. And then now again, because you have not kept my commandment and my statutes, which I commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days. For the sake of your father David, I will tear it out of the hands of your son. However, I will not tear away the whole kingdom. I will give one tribe to your son, that he may, for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. So there is going to be a tearing away. You're going to lose, 10 tribes. You get to keep one. Well, you get to keep Benjamin plus your own Judah. So Benjamin and Judah, and then the other 10, they're going away. They're going to form their own country, and you're going to lose them. Not only that, you're going to have adversaries. Lord raised up adversaries against Solomon. Hadad the Edomite. So all the bad blood, all the sins of the past catch up with him. He was a descendant of the king of Edom. And when David was in Edom and Joab, the commander of army, had gone to bury the slain, he killed every male in Edom, because the 6 months Joab remained there with all Israel until he had cut down every male in Edom. So after David had massacred all the males, Hadad fled to Egypt, and he and certain Edomites of his father's servant with him. So they were survivors. And Hadad was still a child. Then he arose from Midian and came to Paran, and took men with him from the house of Paran and came to Egypt. to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave him a house. So Pharaoh, once again, Egypt is the one that keeps them and grows them to be these adversaries that come back. Hadad found favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so he gave him as a wife to his sister of his own wife, that is the sister of Queen Tahpenes. So not only Solomon had a daughter of Egypt, so did this guy. Then the sister of Tahpenes bore him Genubath, his son, when Tahpenes weaned in Pharaoh's house, and Genubath was Pharaoh's household among the sons of Pharaoh. But when Hadad heard that David had rested with his father, David was dead, and that Joab was also dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart to my own country. I'm going to go back to Edom." And Pharaoh said, "I've given you everything. Why do you want to go back?" "I want to go back. It's revenge, revenge." So he went back to cause trouble for Solomon. Another adversary, Rezon, son of Eladai, who had fled from his lord, Hadazer, king of Zobah. He gathered men to him and became captain of a band of raiders. And when David killed those of Zobah, so this band of raiders by Rezon, he went to Damascus and dwelled there and reigned in Damascus. He was an adversary of Israel all the days of Solomon, beside the trouble Hadad had caused. And he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria because, of course, once again, sins of David, he had gone over and destroyed the people of Zobah. So here was some of the past coming to haunt. And finally, Jeroboam. This is going to be the greatest adversary, son of Nebat, an Ephraimite, his own people, from Zeredah, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, the widow who also rebelled against the king. Why did he rebel against the king? Well, Solomon built the Milo, repaired the damages to the city of David, his father. Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor. Solomon, seeing this young man, was industrious. So you saw, he was a good worker, industrious, and put him as an officer over the labor force of the house of Joseph. So he became one of Solomon's chief men over the labor force that was doing the construction. But when Jeroboam was out Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah of the Shilonite met him on the way and clothed himself with a new garment. And the two were alone in the field. And Ahijah took hold of the garment that was on him and tore it in 12 pieces. So he got the garment, tore it in 12. And he said to Jeroboam, "Take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and will give you 10 tribes to you. But he shall have one tribe for my sake of my servant David, for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because they have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and all the other gods there. However, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, because I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of my servant David. I promised David to someone who would sit on his throne, whom I have chosen, because he kept my commandments, my statutes." David wasn't the best, but he kept God's commandments. Here we see Solomon his heart was taken away. "I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand," not him, but his son's hand, "and give it to you. To his son I will give one tribe, so that my servant David may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself to put a name there. So I will take you, and you shall reign over all your heart's desire, and you shall be king over Israel. Then it shall be, if you heed all that I command," he gives Jeroboam, and we'll see Jeroboam next week. He gives them this is what's going to happen, but also a promise. "If you keep my commandments and follow me like my servant David, I will build you an enduring house." I will do what I did for him, but it's keeping my commandments. "And I will give Israel to you, and I will afflict the descendants of David because of this, but not forever." So word gets out. Jeroboam has been kind of anointed by this prophet, and Solomon therefore sought to kill Jeroboam. Jeroboam arose and fled to, once again, Egypt. Egypt kind of keeps all the bad guys together, to Shishak, king of Egypt, and he was in Egypt unto the death of Solomon. And now Solomon is an old man. His wives are taken away. He's seeing the consequences of his actions. And it says, "Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, his wisdom, are they not written in the acts of Solomon? And the period that Solomon reigned over Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Then Solomon rested with his father and was buried in the city of David, his father, and Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his place." Solomon. Now remember, I said there were 3 writings of Solomon that we have in Scripture. The first one is a Song of Solomon's in his youth. The second one is the book of Proverbs in his middle age, not before his heart was led away. And finally, we had the book of Ecclesiastes. And this was written at the end of his life. Maybe by this time he had realized, and we'll see here, that he had messed up, the God had talked to him, said the kingdom was going to be taken out of his hands. It's kind of a melancholical. It's a very book full of melancholy. And he's a little, kind of this not angry old man, but maybe just like this. Oh, life. We'll see. Vanity of vanities, as he repeats many times. It's a book looking back of a life of a man who had it all and messed up badly. A book from a man who was very wise, but didn't follow his own wisdom. A book from a man who realized at the end of his life that all the things he accumulated were worth nothing. So let's take a look at some of the places in Ecclesiastes. Go with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Vanity, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, so they know it's Solomon, and he names himself the preacher. It says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes, another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. The wind goes towards the south and turns towards the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which all the rivers come, then there they shall return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. There's that lack of satisfaction. That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Another phrase that's repeated in this book. Nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It's already been in ancient times before us. There is no remembrance of former things, like we don't learn from our mistakes. Nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. It says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and to search out wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun. Indeed, all is vanity, grasping for the wind. What is crooked and cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. I communed with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness. I have attained more wisdom than all those who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Here's Solomon talking about his life. I had much wisdom, but it was grief and sorrow because wisdom was not put into practice. There's not a relation. You can know a lot, but it doesn't mean you have a relationship. David was a man after God's own heart. He knew God. He failed, he messed up, but he knew God and he had a relationship with God. Here we see Solomon knew God as far as wisdom and knowledge, but he didn't really know him. He didn't really follow him. He was focused more on the kingdom. So what does that look like? Well, look at chapter 2. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely this is also vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, that I might see what it was good for. For the sons of men do under heaven all the days of their life. So you've been getting to experiment. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to party, see what that's like. I'm going to act like a fool, see what that's like. I made my works great. I built myself houses. I planted for myself vineyards, more and more and more. There it is. I made myself gardens and orchards. I planted all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants, had servants born in the house. Yes, I had greater possessions than all the herds and flocks, than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem, and also my wisdom remained with me. I was doing all these things more and more and more. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked on all the works of my hands had done, all the labor which I had toiled. Indeed, all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There's nothing in it. There's no purpose. There was no profit under the sun. Then I came to myself, and then I realized what's going on. To consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can a man do who succeeds the king? Only what he's already done. Then I saw that wisdom exceeds folly as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all. Whether you're very, very wise or you're a fool, I mean, you might see what's coming or you might have no clue what's coming, but the same thing happens. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? What use is my wisdom, it says in a sense. Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As a fool. This is near the end. I'm a wise man. I die just the same way a fool dies. Therefore, I hated life because of the work which was done under the sun was distressing to me. I looked back and said, this is a waste of time. I hated life for vanity of vanities and grasping at the wind. Then I hated all my labor, which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And he knows it's going to be torn away because the Lord told him, I'm going to take 10 tribes and you're going to get 2 left. And this is going to happen to your son. He's going to lose everything. It's going to be taken away by someone else. And who knows whether he may be wise or a fool. Well, actually, it was the second one. He's going to be a fool. We'll see next week. Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I toiled, in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor which I toiled under the sun. For where there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and great evil. For what has a man for all his labor and for the strivings of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, his work is burdensome, and even the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Nothing is better for a man than he should eat, drink, and his soul should enjoy the good of his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping in the wind. He realizes just getting and getting and getting and getting and more and more and more. It's just vanity. I mean, this having and wisdom and wanting to know everything is vanity. The only thing is seeking the Lord. Nothing is better for a man than he should eat and drink and his soul enjoy the good of his labor. And this was from the hand of God. Just enjoy, just be satisfied with what we have, not wanting more and more and more. And living that life that in God's sight. It said, for who can eat and have enjoyment more than I? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight, following the Lord, not straying to the right or the left. But to the sinner, he gives the work and toil and all this else. So Solomon in some way is kind of in his melancholy. He's looking back in life saying, I went after the wrong things. And what he's going to do in kind of in the rest of the book, he's going to start in this kind of end of life wisdom. He's going to kind of look at life and look at things and start to give, in a sense, these are the old man's proverbs. He's going to give some proverbs, some wisdom from a life lived and a life wasted and a life, trying to get everything there was. He's going to give us some wisdom. And we'll begin with chapter 3. And we know this song is, I think they make a song from it. It says, to everything there is a season, there a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to plunk what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. What profit has a worker from that which in she labors? I have seen the God-given task which with the sons of men are to be occupied. He made everything beautiful in its time. Everything beautiful in its time, as we realize we're all in the hands of God in his time. And he's put eternity in their hearts. And that's a beautiful, it's a beautiful verse. Everything beautiful in its time that God has given us. And he's given us eternity in our hearts as we realize there's more than this life. We have eternity ahead of us. So we keep our eyes, and I think of 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18, not looking at the things which are going to pass away, the temporal, but looking at the eternal, keeping our eyes on eternity. And I think as Solomon looks at his life and is like, what have I done? What have I accomplished? All this, he's looking at the temporal. He said, and here he realized, we need to look at the eternal. He's put eternity in our hearts. There's more than this life. And it all has to do with serving and honoring and obeying the Lord. It says, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. God's in control. I know that nothing is better than for them to rejoice, to do good with their lives. Also that every man should eat, drink, and enjoy the good of his labor. It is the gift of God. Just live for the Lord each day. I know that whatever God does, it shall be forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken away. God does it, and men should fear before him. That which has already been, and that what is to be is already there, and God requires an account of what is past. Everything is under God's control. He knows the beginning and the end. He knows what happened and what will happen, but God requires an account of what we did with what he gave us. Skip down, Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9. We use these at weddings. I like these verses. Two are better than one, because they have good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So the two are better than one, that companionship, being together, having that, not being alone. And I guess Solomon tried to find a lot of companionship, but it was never really true companionship. All these dripping women trying to get him to worship other gods. I don't know, maybe I won't know if he had the one from the Song of Solomon, that first one, that love of his life. But he never kind of found that love he was looking for. He just kept looking for more. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, walk prudently when you go to the house of God. Draw near to hear rather than to give sacrifice of fools, for they do not know they do evil. So when you go to the house of God, listen. Don't try to give sacrifice of fools, act like everything is good and you're just saying a bunch of things, but no, listen. Do not be rash with your mouth, and let not your heart utter anything hastily before God. Man, be careful with your conversations with God. Be careful what you ask for and what you say. For God is in heaven and you on earth, therefore let your words be few. Listen to what he's saying. For dreams come through much activity, and a fool's voice is known by his many words. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and pay. Do what the Lord has asked you to do. And what did he say he would do? He would know the book of the law. He would copy the book of the law. He would not stray to the right or the left. And what happened? He strayed very much to the right and the left with all these foreign women and these foreign gods, and he had to pay the consequence of it. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. A good name. He had very famous all around the world. Queen of Sheba came to see him. Better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. I actually use this passage here at funerals, because when we're in the house of mourning and we're in a funeral, we're all reflecting on life and what our life, not only the life of the person who died, because they're, we're talking about that person, but it's a time when we all reflect on life. When we go to a funeral, someone dies, it brings to mind our life and the end of our life, and that all of us will die, and all of us will come to an end. And what will our life mean? What will people say at our funeral? So a funeral brings these thoughts of eternity on our life and what we've done. That's why he says better is a house of mourning than a house of feasting. Feasting, you don't care. You don't worry about life. Tomorrow. We don't worry about it today. Just have fun, party. No, house of mourning. What about tomorrow? What have I done? How have I lived? That's why he says it's so much better to, it's a place to focus and to know our future. For this is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter. For a sad countenance, the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools in the house of mirth. It is better to hear rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. Listen to the wise, not fools. For the crackling of thorns under a pot, so it is the laughter of the fool. This is also his vanity. Surely oppression destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. The end of things is better than the beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Don't be hastened to be angry. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. Well, when I was a child, we had to go through, snowstorms and they're barefoot. And everything was better before. It says, don't say that. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those under the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. But the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. Wisdom gives life to those who has it. Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? Listen to the work of God. Listen, look at your life. Look at how you're living. Don't look back and always dwell in the past. Look to the future and look to following God and following in his wisdom. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. Follow his ways, follow his road. We're going to skip a little farther to Ecclesiastes chapter 10. And I like this one. That's why I kind of put this in there. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. I think Solomon was talking about himself. Dead flies, this what I did and following these other gods, all my wisdom is for nothing. A little folly, and actually big because his heart turned to other gods, to one respected for wisdom and honor is like this foul odor. And when we think of Solomon, unfortunately, we look at his life and think of all the good things and all the wisdom and all the gold. What do we end up many times thinking about? Well, at the end, he went with foreign women. You see, Solomon, in a sense, did not finish well. We don't know if he wrote this. He repented from his sin and then wrote this later, or wrote this. We don't know what happened here at the end. We don't have much information. We just know that his heart was taken to these foreign women. But Solomon did not end well. He did not finish well, and that caused him great sadness. And it's a great sadness when we see a man who with so much fame end up so badly. Brings to mind, it just is a heavy in my heart. Recently, all the stuff that's coming out about Ravi Zacharias. And if you haven't heard about Ravi Zacharias, one of the greatest, known apologists, wrote many books on apologetics, debated and talked about Christianity and the truth of Christianity, went and was very well known for that. And then got this rare form of cancer and died. And after his death, all this garbage kept coming out. I mean, garbage, just like we see in Solomon, women, foreign women, and all these things that were coming out of his life. And it's just what we see here as we look at the legacy of Ravi Zacharias. And I just pray for his family and for this difficult time. But it's like this dead flies putrefying the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give a foul odor. when we look at his legacy now, is this foul odor. And a little folly, actually a lot of folly, does this to one respected for wisdom and honor. And we see it ruins it. It also, in a sense, gives God a black eye, in a sense, because he gives the people who don't follow God cause to blaspheme the name of the Lord. So not only this, but people are laughing, blaspheming. Oh, he said he was a Christian, and they're talking about the God of the universe, the creator, and saying just another one of those Christians. Look how they live. They're hypocrites. And so they're blaspheming the name of the Lord. So it's very sad when this happens. And when we see that in the life of Solomon, we need to be careful. And we need to learn from the wisdom of Solomon, even as he failed, because he lived this. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. Be very careful. Be very careful, little eyes, what you see, ears, what you hear, mouth, what you see, feet, where you go. Because there's a Father up above who's looking down in love. So be careful, little eyes, ears, mouth, feet. Be very careful. Even a fool walks along the way. Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for conciliation pacifies great offense. Go down to Ecclesiastes 11. Ecclesiastes 11:9. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. And I know that for all these, God will bring you into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. And so looking back to his youth, rejoice, follow the Lord, don't leave him. Well, once again, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, looking back to youth. Verse 1, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw you near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. That's his life. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. In the latter days, you will say, I have no pleasure in them, because he did not follow. He did not have that relationship with the Lord. While the sun and the moon and the light and the moon and stars are darkened, and the clouds did not return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble, the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those who look through the window grows dim, when the doors are shut in the street and the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of the bird and all the daughters of music are brought low. He's talking about the end of the days, when they're afraid of the height and the terrors in the way, when the almond tree blossoms, a grasshopper is a burden, and desire fails, for a man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bow is broken, and the pitcher is shattered in the fountain, or the wheel is broken at the well. Remember your Creator at the end. Don't remember him only in the day of your youth. Remember him before you go. It's your last chance. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. Remember, remember, remember. Finally, and moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails, given by one shepherd. And further, my son, be admonished by these. Of making many books there is no end, and of much study is wearisome to the flesh. He's tired. He's tired. He said, I continue to give the wisdom I had. I made a lot of mistakes. We got that fly in the ointment, putrefying there. But at the end, I see. You see, because what is the conclusion of the matter? What is the end of the matter? Here it is, verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. His whole wisdom, everything he's done, all kind of distilled into one. What is the thing that he's learned? This wisest man in all the earth. Here it is. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. There it is. He ends his life and says, the whole thing is fearing God and keeping his commandments. This is it. This is the whole thing. This is man's all. And as he gives this final calling out, this is the wisest thing I've ever said. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is man's all. He's seen the consequence of not doing that, of having his heart led astray, the fly in the ointment. And he sees at the end, young man, my son, those who read this, don't be led astray. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Maybe you thought nobody will ever know. Well, we do. Fear God, keep his commandments, this is man's all. Who are we? Solomon, wisest man, messed up. Rabbi Zacharias, very wise man, messed up. Consequences. You and I, wise to foolish. Our wisdom can be maybe in this scale where we're at. Whether we're wise or we're more foolish, it all sums up to this: fear the Lord, and keep his commandments. May we do that, and may we live for him.